function, so I thought I should come forward and support whatever activities they are doing. So my intention is to introduce the speakers, give you some ideas what I think personally. I think in this discussion we need to have the men's point of view and the women's point of view, the Eastern point of view, the Western point of view, the religious point of view, the secular point of view. So the different points of view. And I think all of us have our own truths, our own reality, our own perceptions. And I think it's a point that we share them all. We might disagree, but I think the disagreement I see not as a negative thing. I think the disagreement I consider as a healthy thing as far as we do it in a respectful and a peaceful way. So I hope that after the presentations you will have some questions, because your participation will be as important as the speakers. So the two people that I want to introduce, one is our keynote speaker. Her name is Farzana Hassan, and now we call her Dr. Farzana Hassan because she got her PhD, and we're really pleased and proud that she did that hard work and sort of pursued her sort of educational and professional growth. I just borrowed a book that she has written, Islam, Women and the Changes of Today. And as most of you know, that she has been a very passionate speaker. She has been expressing her points of view very boldly, and especially for women, to do that is not an easy thing. There's a lot of resistance, there's a lot of confrontation, but I think she stands sort of tall and strong, and we support her. And sometimes, as I said, there might be a difference of opinion, and I might have differences, but that does not mean that we should not allow people and support people, especially the women of our community, to express their points of view strongly, and we should support them. So I'll invite Dr. Farzana Hassan to come to the stage and have If some of you want to, I think she has kindly brought a few copies. So some of you, if you want to even buy it afterwards, it's available outside. She is very kind that I think all this, the regular price is $20, but because of the seminar she has given and the Aiman Foundation, and those of you sort of discounts, you can get it for $10 today if you want to buy it. The second person that I'm going to introduce, although I have a brief introduction in Urdu, and she would recite a poem for us, having a different point of view, but I'll do the introduction in English because those of some of my friends, especially I have my friend Hildy sitting at the back. I invited her, so I don't want her to miss part of it because she does not understand Urdu. I think Asma Warsi has, for a number of years, more than 2 decades, has been very passionately writing. She started with poetry and literature, but gradually being a social activist, she got involved in women's issues as well as the cultural identity of Muslims, representing the Islamic sort of point of view and promoting and dispelling whatever the people have certain myths or certain perceptions of the Muslims residing in North America. So there is a magazine, I think there might be some copies outside, by the name of Ambition. And for the last 25 years, she has been sort of articulating her point of view. She has been promoting that point of view and engaging in a dialogue, and doing that in English, especially for the younger generation and the immigrants. I think it's a great contribution from her perspective. So when we found out that she's written a poem, an Urdu poem on honor killing, and she wanted to present, and it, as I said, it might be a different point of view than I might have or Farzana might have, but the more points of view we have, the more it gives you an opportunity to question, to ask, share your points of view. So I'm very pleased that Asma Warsi is here, who is promoting, as I said, the magazine Ambition. So I'll invite her. She would also join the stage next to Afaf, and you can have her contribution as well. While she's walking towards the stage, I was telling Afaf that we, being in the family of the heart, are used to small rooms. So this hall is quite sort of overwhelming for the whole. So I think, as I said, that we have two people who will present, but before I invite them, although Afaf had mentioned that I should come in the end and give my point of view, but being the moderator and being the Eastern hospitality, and even in Mushair, as you know, the host usually presents his ghazal or nazam or point of view first. So my humble contribution towards this topic, I'm not an expert in that area, but I have being a person who has some social concerns and concerns about violence, concerns about a peaceful living, concerns about domestic and family violence, and working as a psychotherapist and a humanist, always have an issue that how people could live peacefully and work together to create a certain ambience environment. So I've jotted down my sort of thoughts, and it will not be more than sort of 10 minutes or so, so I will not take too much of your time and leave time for for our other speakers. So this is what I would like to share with you. There are killings and there are honor killings. There are killings by your rival tribes and there are killings by your family members. There are murders by your enemies and there are murders by your relatives. There are murders by people who hate you and there are murders by people who supposedly love you. Honor killings are one of the most psychologically complex, sociologically complicated, morally distressing, and legally challenging violent crimes against humanity. Such crimes have been happening throughout history, all over the world, in many communities, countries, and cultures. In honor killings, victims are mostly women, and murderers are mostly men, whether fathers, brothers, husbands, or sons. The term honor killing was introduced by a Dutch scholar from Turkish background in 1978 to separate such killings from other kinds of killings in the families and communities, to make a special group so that when we are focusing on that, we have a certain particular socio-cultural, economic dynamics of those killings, because it has a certain psychological and cultural flavor to that. According to the Human Rights Watch, the definition is that honor killings are acts of vengeance, usually death, committed by male family members against female family members who are held to have brought dishonor upon the family, unquote. So even the word honor and dishonor obviously has a very touchy, very sensitive, very culturally sensitive issue, that how we use that expression in that. Now, the question is, as a therapist, I feel when somebody kills somebody or hurts somebody, we might have a legal, cultural, religious position, but one of the things is asking person. So when, as a psychiatrist, I used to work in forensic medicine, you go to the person, even the serial killers. As you know, I read in a book about Javed Iqbal Mughal in Pakistan, who was accused and later on convicted for killing 100 children in Pakistan. The judge had asked him to be hanged in front of Minar, Pakistan. So I went from Canada to Pakistan, to Lahore, and went to the death cell. I interviewed him for about 3 hours, and there's a book about that I wrote about serial killing. And my reason of that was to ask him what was his reason, what was his thinking, why did he did what he did. So one of the questions is asking those people who commit these kind of crimes or murders, that what do they think, what are their reasons to do that activity. So one of the important factors to understand the dynamics of honor killings is to focus on the reasons families give to justify killing their beloved daughters and sisters. When I reviewed their stories, I came up with 5 main reasons that these families give for what they do. The first reason given by the families was that girls did not accept arranged marriages. Families wanted to decide the future of their daughters, and when daughters challenged their decision and refused to follow their dictates, family members felt insulted and humiliated and killed their daughters. The second reason presented was that young women had started dating young men and wanted to choose their own partners. Such an act was perceived as rebellion from family traditions. They wanted their daughters to break up their romantic relationships and agree to forced marriages, and when they did not, they were murdered. The third reason of killing was that the woman was raped. Rather than being sympathetic to the victim, the families felt humiliated. The situation got worse when the woman became pregnant. Many single mothers were so scared of their families that they abandoned their children born outside the wedlock. Once a child was left outside the mosque, and many of you might have read in the newspapers, or outside the mosque in Pakistan, and when people came out of the mosque, they stoned the child to death, considering the innocent child a product of sin. The fourth reason offered by the families was that their daughter wanted to leave her husband. Even when the husband was abusive and violent, families did not want their daughter to get divorced, and when she insisted, she was killed. And I've seen a number of Catholic families where the women that I see in my psychotherapy are abused by their husbands, they are insulted physically, emotionally, sexually, but when they go to their families, unfortunately, rather than the sympathetic with the women and in helping them, now there are women's shelter, and some of them, women, we send them there, but the families, unfortunately, the community do not support the families, do not support the women, ask them to stay with them till death do us part. So that whole sort of tradition is very, very disturbing or distressing for these women, especially the children who are involved in that. The fifth reason given, I was going through, while doing the research, I was going through all this, the internet and different things, and one of the most bizarre and sort of a strange reason was given by Maulana, a cleric in Saudi Arabia, and he gave the reason was that the woman was chatting with a stranger on the Facebook. That was considered good enough reason to kill her. The Maulana accused the Facebook for destroying the moral fabric of the society. So it just gives you that how far this mindset has gone, that where people are so controlling or so sort of feeling challenged or criticized by the actions of this young generation, that they cannot accept, tolerate those kind of behaviors. So in all these cases, women were not allowed to talk, meet or date men. Their life and relationships with men were controlled by their families, and every step towards independence was perceived as a threat to family honor. Women were pressured and intimidated to become obedient and passive, and were expected to surrender their will. In these families, independent minds and personalities of women were never encouraged, cherished, and supported. How sad. Now the question is that how prevalent this is. So I was looking at the statistics. So the number of honor killings have been increasing rather than decreasing in many parts of the world. Every year, thousands of innocent women and girls are killed all over the world. Only in Pakistan, 675 women were killed in honor killings in the first 9 months of 2011. So it is not 1 or 2 or 3, there are hundreds. Many tribal traditions, for example, Karokari, I don't even know how to pronounce that word properly, in Sindh maintain such violent practices. It is tragic that many police officers, judges and politicians are more sympathetic to the murderers than the victims and support them on the name of family honor and tribal tradition. In 2008, Israrullah Zahri, a Pakistani politician of Balochistan, defended honor killing of 5 women belonging to Umrani tribe. He had the audacity to say in the parliament, like this is not a private thing at home or in a private meeting, in the parliament, that he said, quote, and I quote him, "These are centuries-old traditions and I will continue to defend them. Only those who indulge in immoral acts should be afraid," unquote. So you could see where the morality and the ethics and the sexual morality comes into the picture of these sort of traditions and how the mindset that has been created. Honor killings are not restricted to Pakistan. They take place in India, in the Middle East, in Latin America, in Europe, and in North America. We have seen a number of such cases in Canada in the last few years, and you can see all over, the media how in the court, one in Kingston and one in the western part. So there are a number of present cases that are happening in Canada, and people are sort of wondering the dynamics of that. Give you a little sort of a sense from the historical perspectives that honor killings are not a recent phenomenon. They've been happening for centuries all over the world. In the history books, we find such cases in 1200 BC in Hammurabi and Assyrian tribes. In those tribes, women's chastity was considered the property of families. In ancient Babylonian, Egyptian, Chinese, North American, Native American tribes, and Persian cultures, women committing adultery were punished. So that was one part of where it started, that how the sexuality was controlled by the state or the religion or the families. Roman law gave complete control to the men of the family for both their children and their wives. It is quite disturbing to read that such killings were rationalized and justified. In ancient Rome, being raped was so dishonorable that the elders of the tribe believed that it would be so detrimental to woman's life and reputation that killing her was considered to be a quote-unquote merciful act. So that just gives you that how a woman's chastity or sexuality, and if she sort of is exposed to certain things, is perceived as such that the dishonor of that as if they want to rescue, they want to justify, rationalize that that was in a way better than a dishonorable living after the act. The question is, are these attitudes, are there